Dan, thanks for coming on. You and I were talking on the phone. This was post-Newtown, where 20 children were killed, 6 adults. You have 42 years in law enforcement. You said to me, you know what? I've got some ideas, and I want to talk about what we should do as a state, as a nation, to fix what is going on here. What was on your mind when Newtown happened?
First of all, you're shocked by it because you never think it's going to be in your backyard. But the thing that really took me back the most was the amount of misinformation initially. The public was looking for information and was receiving a lot of misinformation, which created a lot of confusion, a lot more tension that was necessary. And then you sit back and you take a look at these innocent kids that are kindergarten, you know, and you say, my God, how could this happen? But I hate to say this, Ann, but it's almost a predictable thing that it was going to happen. Not necessarily in Connecticut. And
it's not the first time this has happened
no,
at a school.
We go back to 1927 in Bath, Michigan, where a person on the Board of Education blew up a school and killed children. So we have a history to this. And I listen to a lot of people talking about, well, the Second Amendment, gun control, but I didn't hear anybody putting a program together eclectically that took in all aspects of it. And that made me think of some of the courses I teach at the university, and I did
University of New Haven.
University of New Haven, and the courses I taught at the Connecticut Police Academy at Post. And so I sat down a day and started taking excerpts from here and put together a format which I call the 11 pillars, pillars in prevention and education, kind of like the pipeline. And it's not the answer to everything, but I think it demonstrates that to the degree of the magnitude of the effort necessary to make an impact. I don't think we'll ever stop at 100%, but I think if we take a look at the 11 pillars and see how they, you know, intersect with each other, I think we will give the public a better idea, and hopefully government and schools and families will start talking and dialoguing, and maybe we will be able to have an impact in the future.
All right, so 42 years in law enforcement, on the streets, teaching, you know, state cops in Connecticut. So there's a wealth of information that you bring to these 11 pillars that you've talked about, you've seen it, you've covered everything over 42 years and just retired, although we just said that you haven't retired because you now are a professor at University of New Haven and at the Henry C. Lee College of Criminal Justice. So 11 pillars, what are they? And how do we institute this in the state of Connecticut?
Okay, well, let's take a look at what the 11 pillars are. The first pillar is the foundation of our society. It's the family core. You've got to take a look at the family and how that is designed and set up.
And a lot of families are broken.
A lot of families are broken, and that doesn't necessarily mean because of a one-parent family or not. The economy, the education, society today with our youth is much different than it was in the 50s and 60s and 70s. We're a faster moving society, and we're demanding, kids demand it yesterday. And we have to start refocusing on education. And one of the things that's very interesting is when we take a look at an adult and child learning ability. And I use the Fisher-Price toy, if I use that. I don't know if you ever bought a Fisher-Price toy.
Sure, who didn't?
But, yeah, and the 3 elements to adult learning, which really makes an impact, is the ability for audio, visual, and touch. Every Fisher-Price toy had colors, so you could see it. You touched it, you heard it, and it kind of enticed the child to touch it. Audio, visual, and touch. That's how people learn. That's how people learn. And if you take a look at kids today with their cell phones and
about violent video games.
Violent video games. Audio, visual, and touch. So we have to get back into the method of education to teach our children in a positive way to use the audio, visual, touch to make learning more fun, but, you know, lasting. It's extremely important that we do that. When I was in Branford,
As a policeman?
As a police officer, I saw the same kids getting arrested day in and day out. And then I saw their children getting arrested day in and day out. And I asked the chief at that time, Bill Holohan, and the superintendent of schools, and some people at Southern, if I could embark on a research project. And I did. And the result of that research over 3 years led to a program called Student Awareness. And we had a motto, say no means never having to say I'm sorry. And part of that was given to the White House under the Reagan administration, say no to drugs. So we're kind of proud of that. But the basis of that program was, why do kids repeat? What is the issue? So the research came to find 3 major elements. The first one is decision making. Numerous students at Southern Connecticut State University, I gave them all a legal pad and pencils, and I said, every decision you make in the course of a day, from the time you get up, voluntary or involuntary, mark it down. They all said yes, and then after the research, they said they'd never do that again. The average of all the numbers came to be 5,000 per day on an average.
Decisions that
Decisions making, voluntary or involuntary. If we make that many decisions in a day, and we really don't have the foundation of how to make a good decision, what goes into that decision, you can see where we may learn to tie a shoe improperly and practice it 500 times. We'll become very good at tying a shoe improperly. So we designed the program to help kids identify and make better decisions. The second element was value clarification. And the issue there, if you take juvenile law and you take a look at schools of thought, the classic school of thought and the positive school of thought, had different ideas when kids identify with what's right and wrong. But anybody out there that has a child that's 3 or 4, those children, age appropriate, they know right from wrong at their age appropriate, whether it be mom's voice, dad's look, or whatever. So if the kids at that very young age understand value clarification, how come we don't reinforce that with kids?
Well, why do we not do that as a society? We've got a ton of guns on the streets. You've seen it as an officer. Yep. How do we begin the dialogue in this state, in this country, to fix this? I mean, we're not going to get all the guns off the street. No. So how do we, what is one of the answers? And you talk about the 11 pillars, and we talked about one of them. What is the answer? Or is it a continual dialogue between people to try to get at several answers?
I think it's a continual dialogue of a major cross-section of society, which we have to constantly review, monitor, and readjust. We can't sit still because things change. The second pillar is violence. That's our number one thing in this country. Number one thing is violence. You know, the Office of Child's Advocate reported just last week that for over a 12-year period, they had 924 gun-related injuries, 94 killed kids, and the highest rate between the age of 12 and 17. Well, an interesting thing in history, and we go back to history, and because if we don't examine history, we're bound to make the same mistakes again, I guess, huh? And in World War II, a fellow by the name of S.L. Marshall looked at and was advised that our servicemen were not shooting the enemy. They had a very difficult time in picking up a gun and shooting people. So they reviewed the method of training. No more bullseyes, but silhouette targets, and did a variety of things of not putting the responsibility on the soldier, but putting it on the command staff. From that research, a gentleman by the name of Lieutenant Colonel Grossman tours the country and talks about killology and on killing. And part of his responsibility in the military was to design methods to help the soldiers kill people in war. That's what we do. It's not nice, but that's what we do. And when Senator Joe Lieberman was looking to put a label on the videos many, many years ago,
sure.
I had the opportunity to speak to Colonel Grossman, and he advised me that the research that he put in killology on teaching our soldiers to fight and kill was extremely, if not identical, to the video games that were selling kids. You know, Grand Theft Auto, on and on. And you can go on the internet and you can find the top 10 or 12 violent videos. So we're teaching them a basis of same as we're teaching our military. And if we look at the shootings in our country, you know, we go back to Russia, Breslin, Russia, where they took over the school. So we've had this history way back. Atlanta, just this past January. You know, I jotted down some dates. We had Columbine in '99.
This is $1 billion industry, though.
Sure it is.
These video games.
Sure it is.
How do we get this stopped? Is this about greed? Because the thought is when a child is 5 or 6 years old or 8, whenever they start playing these games, they become desensitized, I would think. How do we stop this?
Well, they also come conditioned to that reinforcement. They get conditioned to that. We make a major effort to stop this the same way we do with marketing and products. If nobody buys your XY cereal, you don't survive, do you? You don't survive. So years ago, people used to smoke cigarettes in restaurants, on airplanes, on buses, used to smoke cigars and pipes. But only when society accepted it, and we are society, only when we accepted that we are not going to allow that smoking to take place. Today, you go into a restaurant and you read the menu, no pipe or cigar. Please put the cigarette down. Oh, I'm sorry, secondhand smoke. We have to change the culture of our society on what the quality of life in America should be with input, not just let it be. We just let it be. We're so busy, we don't take the time to look at this. And it's a strange thing, you know, because Columbine was terrible, but people forget. 9/11 was terrible. We forget. And
Newtown was terrible. Now there is dialogue, but what is it going to take to get society to change? You know, there are many mothers who buy these games for their kids, and that's not solely the problem, but I'm certain it adds up.
It's a contributing factor. It's a contributing factor. When we take a look at the dynamics of what it's going to take a lot of things. The third pillar is the media, in all due respect.
Have at it.
One of the things that the media does is what we call contagion. Okay? The media, and I remember many, many years ago, it wasn't Channel 8, but I remember a man committed suicide, and the reporter was there with a funnel, duct tape, and a hose, and said on the air, this is how so-and-so did this. Well, you're not educating your audience on how to prevent this. You're educating them how to be copycats or how to do this. Where the media must be a partner. You and I have worked together for years in law enforcement. You have earned the respect of law enforcement. And how that was accomplished is by dialoguing and talking. And instead of saying, this is how it's done, how about the media saying, taking suicide as an example, if you know of a family member or a friend that has pain or depression or hopelessness, I call it the PhD of suicide, pain, hopelessness, depression, please contact some medical people, contact your employee, contact the family. Let the media be an educational vehicle to demonstrate, because the media has power. They are very powerful. And people watch the media. People read the newspapers. And people, as the commercial says, they look at the internet and think everything on the internet has got to be true because the internet says it as that commercial. So we have to partnership with the media on a day-to-day basis. It's almost like...
I don't think there's enough of that.
No.
I would tell you that there is not an open dialogue between law enforcement and media where we are talking all the time. Most of the time we're talking after something has happened.
We're reactionary.
Yes.
I asked you to come up to the academy. The recruits are saying, wow, the media is paying attention to me. They're coming up here to understand what I'm doing. Well, they now have respect for you. You have respect for them. And before you can dialogue, you got to have respect in relationships. And that's the key. That has to happen.
But I think that has to be ongoing, and this is
yes.
probably a conversation for another day. That is not happening, and in fact, you know, I think I said to the Academy, we've got to start this dialogue, and that went away. Nothing happened.
Maybe that's because I retired.
Probably because you retired. You know, there's so much I can talk to you about, but you know what's interesting on the heels of Newtown, in 1999, you wrote Strategies for Responding to School Violence.
Yes.
What was that about in 1999? Now it's 2013. Might that change how you would write that today?
I think the foundation is the same. I mean, maybe implementation of it, or the people were getting involved. We had a very strong system in Branford where we met every Friday with the administrative staff at the high school, intermediate school, every elementary school, St. Mary's, superintendent of schools, and we dialogued and we talked variety of things, kids that needed help, family with service needs, kids that acted out. We set up plans on what would happen if this happened, and it developed into a thing that every September or August, I would meet with the administrators and we would have a half a day to go over school law, cooperation. They could pick up that phone, I talked to them, and we dialogued. You said something before that was very interesting about what does it going to take. Let's take the school for an example. If you have a child in school and the teacher does not identify your child with a reading problem or hearing problem, and you find out about it, as a parent, you're upset. How come you didn't identify this learning problem and work with it? Schools today are very, very conscientious of that, and they have a variety of programs to help those children that need help in learning. On the other hand, if a teacher says to a parent, I noticed your child is maybe a little bully here, or is acting out over here, we're going to try this educational intervention. Parents are very quick, not all, but parents are very quick and are different than a learning experience to say, not my kid, I'll sue you. So when we had the school program, one of the reasons why it didn't take off is that some unions and teachers were afraid of being sued, so they backed off. But it's the same thing, help my child now or help my child later. If you look into history of juvenile law, you'll find a thing which they call pathways to delinquency. Pathways to delinquency, and there's three major ones. The first one is delinquency to authority, where a student has an issue with mom and dad, teacher, coach, policeman, authority. It starts at a very young age and blossoms around 14. The second pathway to delinquency is called overt, outward, the bully. And we know about the bullies, don't we? Connecticut has developed laws and created laws, and all schools are worried about the bully on school buses, in school, neighborhood. The overt. And the third is covert, the fire burning, the vandalism, the burglary. My research that I took further than the author of Pathways to Delinquency has been done over the 13 years at the Police Academy. And here's the question I asked, and the overwhelming number is around 85%. How many of the students that I have met, and now we're doing it at the University of New Haven as well, how many knew a child when you're growing up that had an authority delinquency, an overt or covert issue? And everybody says, yeah, I knew this. I knew. Mm-hmm. The interesting thing is when a student has all three, we identify authority issues, covert and overt, and now I ask the students, where is that person now? Several say, I don't know. 85% and higher say either dead or in prison. So let's go back again. If we can identify early intervention, because school psychologists and professors throughout the country state that a child learns 80% of everything they will learn before they're 6 years of age. 80%. So those first 6 years are critical. Most of those are in the home. So again, back to the family core. But also preschool, nursery school, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade are critical years. And with audio-visual touch, we now maybe you start seeing how the pillars are working together. But it's a mammoth task. It's a lot of energy and a lot of money.
Well, we've got to wake up there's so much more I could talk to you about, but I want to end this by saying you have 42 years in law enforcement. You're one voice among many who's trying to figure out, what do we do as a state, as a country? Are you available if somebody wants to put you on a task force?
Oh, of course.
That's all I
course.
needed to hear.
Of
Stanley,
course.
thanks for coming on.
And thank you for always being there for law enforcement.
Appreciate your insight.
Thank you.